One of the things that I've struggled with, I know that it's important to have quality of life, to live a wholehearted life, to live, with all of your pieces, all of your parts, being honored. But I struggled to know if you could actually run a financially profitable farm and have quality of life. And what's been gratifying in our work together is seeing that it is possible to have quality of life and a profitable farm business. So that's actually really exciting to see how it all comes together.
Welcome to the Seed Farmer Podcast, the podcast where I want you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant that seed out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer Podcast and find it to be a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/support podcast. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Tournesol Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. On today's minisode, I've got a guest. We've been working on a project pretty steadily since April 19th, and I want my guest and I to tell you all about this project. But first, news. So I'll begin with a story from Tournesol Farm. We're out of garlic shipping now, but one of the last things that we were shipping was, if we start off at the end of August, you have your perfect bulbs, and we're shipping all of those. But at a certain point, after we've finished a CSA and finished garlic planting, we start to have a bunch of other stuff too. And we like smaller mismatched bulbs, and we put them on the online store to sell them by, I think maybe by the pound or by the 550 grams, something like that. And we got a few funny emails shortly after the products were online about people having a hard time completing their orders. Their address is being refused by our online store. And I had to poke around a little bit. And ultimately what I found is that these products, they weighed 1,500 kilograms, each of them. So that's like 3,300 pounds, which is not what Canada Post will ship under any circumstances in an envelope. And so I just had to change this to making them their actual weight. But it was the default for whatever reason, the product was set up that way. And I actually do know why it was set that way from a different time when we were trying to run our CSA through this online store. And no longer are doing that. But I forgot about that. And really, I guess the moral of the story is that you should know how your products are formatted before you push publish. And so that's just a quick thing at Tournesol. Other news. So if you're listening to this on December 17th, which is right the day it's supposed to drop, there is a link in the show notes about an event that's taking place this evening at 7 p.m. Now, it's a bit of a funny thing to announce because I don't yet know all the details of the event. I'm going to know them this week in a couple days, but I'm just telling you now because we're recording this now. And the tentative working title is a solstice seed celebration, and we'll have gotten more in details into this in last week, which has already, anyway, just to tell you that go check the show notes to look for the event. And if you're past December 17th, we're hoping that this is going to be a quarterly call for people who love to talk about seed and want to network and get to know each other more. And I'll share more details as the next one comes. And now I also have a follow-up story from episode 32, which was a mini-sode entitled Mystery Squash is Fun Until It's Not. And we were talking about cross-pollination and all that. But this story is about how I mentioned different squash species, including Cucurbita moscata. Or is it moschata? Anyway, I pronounce it moscata. It's written Moschata. And I got a comment from Josh Mayfield who said, I'm an amateur squash breeder here working with C. moscata mostly. I pronounce it moschata because that's how Michael Mazurek pronounces it. And so Michael Mazurek is a plant breeder at Cornell who works with squash, especially with these moschatas. And so, of course, I emailed him and I asked, how do you pronounce Cucurbita moscata? With a soft CH like sheep or a hard CH like cake? And Michael wrote back, in English, like sheep. But in other languages, I could see that accent being different. So does it make it official? Is it now Cucurbita moscata? I don't know. I think I'm going to keep using moscata. Let me know if this upsets you. All right. And send me any other seedy news that you might want me to share. And now let's get into today's mini-sode conversation. Hi, Julia. Welcome to the Seed Farmer Podcast.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for having me.
It's great to be here. Do you want to introduce yourself and I guess how we know each other and tell me about the request you made to me last December at the New England Vegetable and Fruit Conference?
Sure. So, hi, my name is Julia Shanks. I wrote a book called The Farmer's Office, an absolute page turner, farm finances, how to keep your books and make data-driven decisions with your numbers so you can be profitable on your farm. And a seed farmer as well can be profitable. So I've been working with farmers since 2008, helping them with their financials. And so much of my work is in the office, helping them with their numbers. And I've really felt like my work has been falling short a little bit. And I've had this idea for a book that I wanted to write for a very long time. And I was trying to figure out, like, how do I take the numbers and make them more practical? And I'm not a farmer. I don't play one on TV. So I was thinking to myself, I needed to collaborate with a farmer. Any rate, I've been following you, Dan, for a very long time. I learned about the Farmer Spreadsheet Academy, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and I've been fangirling ever since. And when I saw that you were speaking at the New England Fruit and Vegetable Conference last December, I was like, I have to go. I have to meet this man in person. I had just moved the week before. I was absolutely crazy to be not dealing with everything else, but I was like, I have to meet you. So, anyway, I drove to New Hampshire and I listened to your talk. And your talk was actually about crop planning. And I loved what you said about, how your revenue leads to your harvest plan, and your harvest plan leads to your planting, and your planting leads to your seed order, and your seed order leads to a cost. And I loved how you sort of took that end product and brought it all the way back to the financials. So you and I talked a lot that day. We talked over lunch, and as I was leaving the conference at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was literally 2 feet from the door. My coat was all bundled up, and I ran into you in the hall, and we started chatting. And then I got overheated because we were chatting inside, and I was still wearing my coat. So I took off my coat, and we continued to talk. And we talked a little bit more, and then we got tired, so we sat down and we continued to talk. And I said to myself, I like this guy, and I like the exchange that we're having around farm financials and sustainability and business and entrepreneurship. And even though I'd known you for less than a day, I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask you if you want to write a book with me. And thank goodness I was sitting down because you actually took the request seriously. So here we are, a year later, almost to the day, and we have written a book together.
I like the way you tell the story, though I find it's a little bit, well, though it's the first time we met in person, and it's definitely, it changes the way you interact with somebody to meet them in person. We have been talking on Zoom back and forth for a few years before that.
So that is true.
So it wasn't totally out of the blue, though the way you tell the story is pretty good. When you told me the idea you had for the book, and I was thinking about it, it sounded like a great book, and you caught me at a funny time because I was trying to figure out, do I simplify sort of what I'm doing? Because I do the Seed Farmer podcast, and I had just written a book, and I was wondering if I should be doing less of like farmer spreadsheet stuff and maybe just narrow in on seed stuff. And what you were proposing was kind of like the opposite of that. But I do love spreadsheets. And there's also, back in 2022, in the fall of 2022, you and I were talking about what we were going to do the next year, and I told you I wanted to write another book. The first one being the crop planning book I wrote with Fred. And I didn't know what I was going to write about, and I didn't know how I was going to get published, but I just decided I want to write a book next summer. It's at that point in my life. And the next day, you wrote an email on your own initiative introducing me to Rob, your editor at New Society of Publishers. And that conversation is ultimately what led me to writing and publishing The Seed Farmer. So I've always been grateful for that initiative on your part. And I thought, do I owe you a book as a thank you? And it's a pretty big thank you.
Yeah, wow.
but I definitely felt indebted to the initiative you took and really grateful.
Well, it's funny because the timing was just, it's like you put out into the universe what you want. And you had said to me that you wanted to write a book. And the next day or 2 days later, I got a call from New Society. We need somebody to write a book about whatever, whatever. And I don't think it was about seed farming, but I think that's what you ultimately ended with. But the fact that I got that call right after you had said that you wanted to write a new book, it was like the stars aligned to make that connection.
I think they wanted me to, they were looking for somebody to write a farm co-op book, which I could see how it might seem like I'd be a good person for that, being in the farm space and working on a worker co-op, but that's not the book I wanted to write. And well, I'm really thrilled to be writing this book with you. I think one more thing I wanted to just share was sometimes some folks are really afraid of collaborating on stuff. And I understand that. In the world that we live in, it is really a world about being an entrepreneur, being a go-getter and hustling. And there's not a lot about working together and collaborating and cooperating. But I found that in my life, in my career, collaboration has always brought on better things than if I worked alone. And so I already co-wrote a book with my co-farmer, Fred Terrio, the crop planning book. And I know that book is better than if I had just wrote it on my own. And I started a farm with 4 other people that's now grown to being 11 members plus non-members. And it is definitely better than anything I could have done by myself. And even this podcast was started kind of at the request or the offer. Jesse and Jackson from No-Till Growers kind of asked me, pitched the idea, and they supported me through the first episodes, I guess 20-something episodes, and even with the post-production and all that. And so I know that collaborating with people can be really powerful and bring really wonderful things. And so I'm glad I said yes.
Me too. Well, and it's funny you say that because I've been a solopreneur. I think I started my first business in 97. And with the exception of 2 years of business school and 2 years of working for somebody else, I've been on my own since 97. And I absolutely recognize how much more you can do when you collaborate and when you bring in complementary skills. Certainly, there's something lovely about working on your own and not having to answer to somebody else and being able to make all the decisions yourself. But there's also something really wonderful about collaborating and creating something bigger and better than what you could have done on your own.
So here we are, December 2nd. People listening to us, it's after December 2nd, but we're recording this on December 2nd. And so yesterday, we submitted the manuscript for the book, which there's still work to do. The final manuscript is due in 2 months, but this is a pretty complete picture of what it's going to be. Julia, do you want to tell us what this book is all about?
So am I allowed to say the title? Are we telling people what it's called?
I think we're telling you the title. I think it's official now, okay. So we can tell the title.
Right. Well, the title of the book is The Profitable Farmer, Strategic Farm Business Planning for Profits, Purpose, and Quality of Life. And this book is helping to make the connection between what happens in the office in terms of financial management and what I do so much of, and what happens in the field with production, and also what happens on the road with your customers. So really making the direct connection between the numbers and the activities that happen running a farm business and bringing it all together so that farmers can be more profitable. And I think one of the things that you brought to this conversation, and certainly I've been thinking about, but not as succinctly as you brought it, is the piece about quality of life. And obviously, it is so important to both of us that we put it in the title of the book. I talk a lot about financial sustainability and needing profits to keep doing the work that you love. And one of the things that you really brought to the forefront is that quality of life is also a really important part of sustainability, that if you're not living a wholehearted life and if you're not getting good rest and enjoying activities outside the farm, then this work is not sustainable. You're going to be burnt out and not being able to do it for a very long time, which is what we want farmers to be able to do.
Yeah, quality of life is, it's funny that you mentioned that. Quality of life was definitely something that, it seems obvious, right? But I think it took us 5 or 6 years on our farm to figure it out, and we definitely were pushing for profit. We got to pay ourselves, right? Like you got to make it work. And after 5 or 6 years, we were pretty successful by what we were trying to achieve, but we were also tired a little bit. And our whole farm team did a holistic management training with Tony and Fran McQuail of Meeting Place Farm. We did a whole holistic management training with from other farmers. And one of the things that really came out of there was just how important quality of life was. And so that's something like 15 years ago and it just that at that moment after that workshop, it just changed how I see what we were planning for and how profit is just one of the things that makes up quality of life. Though in this book, we talk about them side by side, and I think that's fine.
Well, I think it's also important. I mean, I've been talking until you and I started working on this book together. I'd been talking about living a wholehearted life, and I think that comes from Brene Brown. But the concept is the same. And one of the things that I've struggled with, I know that it's important to have quality of life, to live a wholehearted life, to live, with all of your pieces, all of your parts being honored. But I struggled to know if you could actually run a financially profitable farm and have quality of life. And what's been gratifying in our work together is seeing that it is possible to have quality of life and a profitable farm business. So that's actually really exciting to see how it all comes together. So I'm glad for that.
Do you want to just discuss kind of the structure of the book as we have it planned, and assuming the editor lets us keep it that way? I really hope they do, because I can't imagine rewriting that part, that much of it.
I know. Can we re-record this in 2 weeks when we hear back from him? Well, it's funny the evolution of the structure of the book, because I think you really wanted to write a book on strategic planning and how to write a 5-year strategic plan. And I'm like, we're not writing a strategic plan. That's like visionary and long term. And, we're doing something very actionable this year. And I think we actually came to a lovely compromise, because we do have 3 parts of the book. And the first part is 5 years from now. And where do you want to be? And what vision do you see for yourself and for your farm? And, what is the sketch of that 5-year plan? How do you kind of make the markers in time and create that path to get there? And then the second part is this year. So you have your 5-year plan. Now, what are you going to do in the first year to take those first actionable, concrete steps in your plan and test out your plan in the field and in the office and on the road? And the third part of the book is the evaluation and learning and reflection. How did that first year go? How does it line up with your plan? And how do you want the next year to go? So the 3 sections are 5 years from now, this year, and next year.
You've sold me on the book. I can't wait to read it.
Me too. I'm so excited. One of the things that you had asked me was, how is the book that we created together different than what I had envisioned? And first of all, I wasn't sure what the book could be. I knew I wanted this book to be written, and I knew that I couldn't write it by myself. So I didn't know what pieces would be filled in. And when I had that first vision of the book, I thought it was going to be more connected to the profit and loss, and going line by line through the profit and loss and saying, all right, what does this number mean to your operation? So your seed order is $3,000. What does that mean for your operations? And your mulch and fertilizer and soil amendments are this much, and what does that mean for your operation? And but I wasn't really sure how it was going to work, because I don't have the direct production experience. So it's exciting to see how the book has evolved to what it is. And I think when we first sat down to start writing and putting together our initial outlines, I'm like, God, do I really have 50,000 words to say about this topic? I mean, I want it written, but I don't know if I got it. And somehow we got it.
I think you had a clearer idea of what the book could be, and maybe has changed from what you thought it was initially. I feel like it took me 5 months of writing to figure out what it was going to be. And then I really liked it when it got to there.
Well, that's quite endurance and commitment that for 5 months you were writing and you weren't sure if you liked it, and you still persevered to get to that other side.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways we could have written the book. And I think there's some ways where it could have been more like, this is your half, this is my half, and we kind of meet somewhere in the middle. And we chose to go a much more integrated way. And I do think it's made, not that it couldn't have been a good book, the other one. I think we could have been a really good book that way too. Maybe that's next one. I don't know. We'll get through this one first.
Yeah, step one before step two.
Yeah. But I think this book is much stronger integrated. And like we really worked, I mean, you and I have different approaches. I mean, well, because we're dealing with different things when we deal with the farmers, you know. And I don't tend to be working in the nitty gritty of expenses and budgets and cost of production stuff. Like those are all important. I allude to them, but I'm focusing on other things. And you have your approach, which is actually more of those things I'm not focusing on. And I think we've really melded them together in a really nice way, making it something that's accessible to a broad range of people and leaving ways for people to get really deep in the parts that they want. I like writing. I've been writing for forever, and I choose to do it, like it's a choice, but it isn't an easy thing to do. It's you have to figure out what you're going to say. And unfortunately, I find like when I'm writing an article, I find it's often the last line of the article. I'm like, oh, that's what this article's supposed to be about. And it's like, do I have the time to now throw the first article out and write a second one? And I think that that's just a reality of writing anything. So this book, not to say that I didn't have any idea where we were going. Like, we wrote a proposal, we submitted, it got accepted, we talked about it nonstop, we were meeting every week, but it still took months. Like, I don't know if it was like an end of August or even end of September, there were a couple decisions that we made or realizations we made that were like, oh, wow, this is a really good next step. I think it's when we got the structure of the 5 years, 1 year, next year, that really helped line me.
Well, it's interesting too. I think the process of writing and, anything that's difficult, you still have to do it. It's like, and I hate to say it, but it's true with bookkeeping. It's like you just have to persevere even when it's ugly and messy and you don't know what you're doing. And then all of a sudden you figure out what you're doing, but you have to go through that ugly, messy, difficult part to get to the place where you know what you're doing. So I think it's interesting to hear you say that.
What's nice about farming, and that's kind of what we're talking about in this book, is that once you get through the messy part of doing, then it's a little bit about not rinse and repeat, but like just keep doing it better and better. And one thing that's different with writing a book is that each new book is kind of from scratch.
Start over.
Yeah. And yes, the whole publishing part is the same. You're going to have deadlines and that stuff, but what you're writing about might be very different than your last one. So
one of the questions, or one of the things that you said to me that fateful day in December when we met in person for the very first time, you said to me that you wanted to write a new book every 2 years. How do you feel about that the day after our submission?
Oh, I still do. And
that's amazing.
And I have 2 or 3 ideas about what that book might be. So that hasn't stopped. That is something that I've been a heavy reader since I was young. And I have always admired writers who have just created a library of books, and especially when they're good books. Not that I don't admire writers who just write 1 or 2 books. Like, a good book is a good book, but I've always kind of wanted to be one of those writers, and farming and family can get in the way, but here I am, almost all the way through book 3, and so I think this next phase of my life, I would like to do that. We'll see if New Society Publishers wants to support that, or if I just got to go self-published, or they're just things I'm going to stash underneath my bed.
Well, number one, I think New Society is a big fan of yours. I don't want to say they're your number one fan because I know that I'm a bigger fan. And I know I'm behind a few other people, but I think New Society is a huge fan, and I'm sure they would love to publish your next book. Self-publishing is an interesting route as well.
All right, to move the podcast along, what are you most excited for readers to find when they open these pages?
Um, I think I'm excited for clarity, and I think as a fellow entrepreneur, sometimes you feel like you're spinning your wheels and what's the process to do all these things and how do I organize all these disparate pieces of my business and my life? And I feel like we've offered a really nice framework of how to pull together all the different pieces and how to actually create a 5-year plan, how to execute upon it, and how to evaluate it. So I'm really excited about this framework that we have for them.
I'm really excited about two things. One is how it all leads at one point into cost of production. And I mean, people don't have to go in depth in that to enjoy this book, but I do find it's a missing piece on a lot of farms is to really understand whether you're making money or losing money on a crop. And I think I'm really excited about how we've integrated that into this book. Something I'm also excited about is your stories. You've been working with hundreds of farmers for years, and you've got a really great way of capturing the essence of what makes that story exciting, engaging, and informative. And I think not that this book would be dry without them, but I think it really helps flesh out and give good examples and inspire. Because we are two people, so we have more perspectives than if we're one. But I mean, I'm writing from a vegetable farmer and seed farmer perspective, though unfortunately there's not as much. There's barely any seed in this book, but it still applies.
I know that's a real shortcoming of this book. I mean, I think we might need to add a chapter about seeds.
Well, maybe we could do that in the last draft before the manuscript. Just slip it in.
Oh, you know what? Well, no, seriously, this is an oversight, and I think we need to talk about this. We don't have any case studies as it relates to seed farmers.
Well, I'll let readers find out what happens with that when we find out what happens with that.
I think we can come up with a good one.
Yeah. And so, but just to finish that previous idea, what I like about your stories is just that you have perspectives of livestock producers and folks who work with different types of agricultural production, value-added production. Though I don't know if we get in value-added into these stories. Maybe that's more from the farmer's office. I'm remembering that. But that's something I'm really excited for readers to find.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've been talking a lot about, and I think that we were able to articulate in a way that I have not previously, is clarifying not just the distinction between revenue and profit. And your comment about digging into cost of production is so important because farmers often focus on the revenue, what they can earn selling something, and not what it costs them to produce it, because profit is what matters to keep doing this. But also the difference between profit and what you take home at the end of the day. That just because you earn a profit doesn't mean you have cash in the bank. And, this is something I've seen so many farmers struggle with. They're like, I'm profitable and I have no money. I don't understand. And it can be really demoralizing and frustrating. And I think you and I have really added some clarity to that conversation to help farmers understand what they need to generate in profits to still have that quality of life that we advocate for.
That sounds great.
Am I giving away too much of the book?
No. I think that if this excites you, you should mark September 2026 on your calendar and pre-order at the moment it's available and then read it. And well, I'm for sure I'll tell you about it. I'm sure Julia will keep talking to people about it, and we'll keep you posted on how it's going. But before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to add? It can be about the book, but also just in general about what you're doing or where people can find you.
Well, what I'm doing right now is resting because we worked really hard the last few weeks. But folks can find me at thefarmersoffice.com. And if you're ready to dig into the numbers and focus, really on QuickBooks and financial management, I've got some great resources over there, and I would love to share them with you all.
Well, that's fantastic. So, Julia, thank you so much for coming on the Seed Farmer podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, and hopefully I can come back again and we can talk about seeds because I got a lot to say about seeds from the home gardener's perspective.
We'll make a date.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And that's another mini-sode of the Seed Farmer Podcast. Thank you, Julia, for coming on to talk about the Profitable Farmer book. I'm really excited for folks to be able to read our book next September. And this was a huge project, and it's a really nice way to end the year to have done this. So this is a call out to you listeners. Is there something big that you've done this year that you would like to share? And why don't you could send me a email about it, or you could also send me a voice memo. And maybe if there are some interesting ones, I'd be happy to include them in a future episode. And it could be a farm project. Maybe it's a seed crop that you took on, or something else that you want to tell me about. Anyway, I'd love to hear your big farm successes this season. Thank you to Sophia Sedalton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at sophiasedalton.com. Thank you to Molly Brisebois for editing this episode. And thank you so much for listening. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. And eventually, this next book, The Profitable Farmer, too. And you can support the podcast at spreadsheet.farm/support podcast, or follow the link in the show notes. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.